Hi, I'm Brian Takumi, and I'm the VP of Product Creative, and I'm here to talk to you about Chapter 4 of The Origins of Oakley. Today, what we're going to talk about is the mad science behind the brand and what are some of the drivers in manufacturing and the technologies that bring the product to life. When you start to think about optics, this is really what put Oakley on the map. Jim's idea about making optically correct eyewear really came from the lens blank, and when you start to think about the eye. When you start to think about the human eye, it's basically a sphere. There's really only one point where you look out of that is optically correct. Once you start to drift away from that, you start to get a fishbowl effect. And so what Jim thought of is, if I can make my sports performance eyewear align with the center of the eye, I can make an optically correct sunglass. And not only that, if I patent it, no one else can actually make one. And this is actually what we did and what the patent we own on high definition optics. One of the other things that came with high definition optics was really developing this lens out of what we know as plutonite. And this was the material that provided our optical clarity and our impact protection. Really important in sport performance when you talk about rocks being thrown up while you're riding at your face, when you talk about obstacles that come up. There are 4 tests that from the American National Standards Institute that we've worked with to really define the foundation of what we could do in sport performance eyewear. The first one being the laser light test, where you fired 2 lasers through the lens and they had to focus on a single point. The impact tests of high mass and high speed, and the prismatic test of high definition. Oakley was the only brand that passed all 4 and could package it up into a performance eyewear piece that you could wear every day. And the only other things that existed to that point were industrial strength glasses that were basically a boxy shape of plastic that wrapped around your eyes. One of the other things that comes with the mad science of Oakley is really some of the manufacturing processes we went through and how we pioneered a lot of that. As we talk about our O-matter frames and the nylon we were using to make them, was how do you bring that dimension and sculpture into metals? And that came to life in iJacket. And iJacket was a very pioneering piece of its time, something that not only others were afraid to do, they couldn't do. And that's because this was the first sunglass designed in CAD. And what it meant was having to come up with new processes to do that. So not only was this designed in CAD, to be able to prototype it, it was done on a 3D printer. Jim actually bought the 3rd 3D printer ever made. The first 2 went to NASA, and he bought the 3rd because it was really the only way for him to be able to prototype his eyewear. Everything we had done to that point had really been in a shield. What iJacket had was bringing the wrap, the dimension, the sculpture, and the performance features into a dual lens. Nothing like that had existed before. The next step for Jim was really, how do I bring the dimension and sculpture he had just brought into the nylon frames and O-matter into wires. We had wires such as E-wire and A-wire, but at the time, everything was pretty much stamped or extruded. So he had to think about a new way to bring life and dimension into metals. And just as he had done with 3D printing in nylon, he brought it into the metal frames also. By researching a new way to cast metal and titanium, he came up with what we know fondly today as X-metal. And what this was able to do was bring the sculpture and dimension we were seeing in iJacket and straitjackets at the time into what became Romeo, Juliet, and Mars in X-metal. All of these things are examples of how Jim was bringing his mad science to life, is whether it was optics, the manufacturing, the lens technology, the design of the frame, the prototyping process, all of it was laying the foundation for the possibilities of what we could do in sport performance eyewear. Thanks for joining us on The Origins of Oakley. Hopefully this gives you a small glimpse into some of the philosophies and DNA behind the brand, from its beginnings in its early days in a garage to what made it into one of the biggest sports performance brands in the world, and certainly the leading one in eyewear. Thanks for joining us, and we're super excited about what the future holds and where we're going to go from here.